Tobias, man, nice to chill with you. Um, First question of the interview portion, man, is um, like I do a lot of work with young people now as part of my day job, and you've had a lot of success, right? And one of the questions I get asked a lot is like, what does success mean, and how because people look at people like yourself and they think, oh, look at he's on social media, he's doing all this successful stuff, he's been in Children, million streams, etc. And they kind of, shit, I'm never going to be like that. I'm never going to get there. And so my first question for you, man, reflecting on your past and reflecting on where you are now, is how do you define success as a person and an artist?
I mean, success is very relative, isn't it? I mean, success is quantifiable, like sort of introspectively,
Yeah.
and from how it looks on the outside, especially with the rise of social media, like anything can look successful. I think success is based on your comfort levels within the thing that you're doing. And I mean, a lot of people like to base success on sort of numbers or what you've done. I've never really been like that. I think the most successful thing is something that resonates and something that just always gets brought up in conversation. If you're always brought up in conversation, you're on your ways to success, if not successful. So basically, my definition of true success is sort of whatever you present outwardly, if you can feel that inwardly and you don't feel like imposter syndrome, basically. If you can get over imposter syndrome, you're a success at this point in time.
Nice one.
That's the way I see it.
Nice one. Have you ever had imposter syndrome? And how
like all the time, literally all the time. I mean, for one, I'm like sort of in memes about being like a black goth, which is amazing because I am that. But also at the same time, it's like, I don't know. I think I could be more goth, maybe. I think I need like more trinkets and sort of like maybe get the hair back and stuff. So yeah, there's that. And then I sort of like find myself falling into all these spaces. Like, for example, I'm like somewhat in the digital art scene now with the new projects that I've been doing, just by trying out new things. That's a whole kettle of fish. And then I'm in the tech world now with like this whole NFT and crypto space and all this stuff. And there's a bunch of people out there that are like wildly more experienced than me in all these things. And so sometimes it's a hard thing to sort of fathom where you're doing all these things and you think that you're good enough, but then there's always someone better that might be sort of weighing on your head and maybe, I don't know, just sort of trying to dim your light. And that can bring up a lot of imposter syndrome, but you just gotta go through it, innit? I mean, what can you really do? You are yourself until you're not, I guess.
Absolutely, man. Absolutely. I mean, that's one of my questions for later on, but I'll bring it forward. We'll talk about the NFT stuff as well as your new material. But how much importance do you put on the image? Because I love your visuals. The other children visuals was cool, but I love the stuff you're doing now, like the videos, as Okandi is what you're doing, as this project. So how much importance do you place? Because I guess you've done modeling as well in the past.
I might have done, yeah.
Yeah, how much importance do you place, and how much, I guess, weight does image have on what you do?
I mean, we live in an age where you can literally be whatever you want. Whether it's like, there's so many people coming off the back of like social media platforms. So if you take TikTok, for example, image is being normalized. The idea that you have to look like the model or the idea that you have to look like the influencer is being completely dismantled right in front of us, especially with the rise of pandemics and stuff. Everyone's really looking to follow any certain mold. And I really like that. And that's sort of like one of the pros I find of sort of coming up in a digital age. I think image can be very much subverted now. And so it really doesn't matter what you look like. I guess it's what your output is. And like you can be as low key or as in your face as you want. And it remains just, if you have that essence, you have it. And if you don't, you might have to rely on a lot of image. It's just up to you, really.
Yeah. I think it can mess with people. Again, it's the other thing. The reason I brought up my work with young people is there's a lot of that weight of image. I have to look a certain way and I have to be a certain way. And you mentioned, the impact of goth culture on yourself and your music and your history. Do you was there ever been a time where you felt the image of what you sort of do defined who you were to a point where it was detrimental, if you follow what I mean? Because image can really sort of hamper the vision of what somebody's trying to do. And I wonder if you've ever been in that situation.
I guess I felt that with our children a little bit. So with our children, I love goth music.
Yeah.
I make goth music, and at the time, I was like, yeah, I want to roll around like a goth. I want to roll around specifically like a black goth. And I want everyone to know it. Yeah. What I didn't know is that Oh Children was going to get such like a cult following, like a cult worldwide following.
Yeah.
That I don't know, 10 years down the line, it's actually coming up. No, wait, it's the 11th anniversary now of Dead Disco Dancer. But the way I see it, pandemic happened, so it's technically the 10th. The same way they're doing with the Euros. But I didn't think 10 years later that people were still going to be wanting and even demanding that new Oh Children records come out, and to get shocked when I'm just sort of like, here, a dad, not in goth clothes. But I can't also call that detrimental because that's part of me now. And the way I see it, if I want to switch to a goth thing, like I said, with the rise of the internet, the rise of alternative forms of social media and self-expression, even within music industry, you can really be whatever you want. So if I wanted tomorrow to just be like, okay, I'm back to the goth, I can do that. If I want to be like, I'm a father now, I do that. If I want to, I don't know, if I want to sort of just do an online course and become a doctor, I can do that. You can do anything, basically. Yeah. It's up to the people if they allow that change, though. That's sort of the thing that's harder. I do also want to add, though, because you brought it up, in terms of sort of young people and their the perception of themselves on social media, I do think that that's a problem. But I think it's up to, I guess, the gatekeepers in all industry, influence industry, music industry, to start being themselves, because they're the ones that these kids are sort of, I guess you could say, controlled by, but they look up to them, or they look up to their output. And so it starts, it starts from there, because it's all well and good saying just believe in yourself, you can do anything. At the same time, there's a lot of people that have a responsibility to sort of show people that you don't have to look, act, or feel a certain way.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So it's it's what you're saying is it's within the person with the influence to sort of present themselves as their truest and realist form.
Yeah, what I'm saying is these influencers need to get some responsibility sometimes, because that's what they're moving back.
Yeah, absolutely, man. Absolutely. Before we move on to the new stuff and what you're working on now, again, I had a really nice time reliving, some of the old children stuff recently. Disco dances are such an earworm, and I was listening to Smile earlier as well from, and I wanted to ask you how you look back on Oh Children and and that time in your life, because I guess it's been a long time. A lot's happened. Obviously, you mentioned the cult following, taking you to, over 1 million streams, etc. Yeah. How do you look back at that time in your life and the music, but more so for yourself? Because you can't speak for the rest of the band. So, for yourself, how do you reflect on that time in your life?
I mean, I reflect on it. I had the best times. Pretty much everything that I've done, my main goal is just to have a really good time doing it, and then whatever comes of it. And with Oh Children, that was my formative sort of beginning to understand how to be independent as an artist, beginning to understand how to essentially move. Because, Oh Children was a very, very niche thing. It wasn't this was at the time when stuff you'd hear on the radio was either middle of the road pop records, or sort of I guess you had a bunch of indie darlings, but then we were goth, so, and trad goth as well. Yeah. And so it wasn't something that I was thinking this is going to be the biggest thing in the world until much later, actually, second album. But then I guess with that, I was having fun through a lot of sort of turmoil and trauma to do with immigration and to do with being unable to travel and really fulfill myself fully. And so I kind of look at it with mixed feelings. I feel like there's unfinished business there. That's my main thing. And I'm sort of trying to reflect that in the new stuff. That's why everything's like, Candy, everything. It's still because I'm like, my whole theory is essentially nothing is ever really finished. And so if you look back at it too much and don't sort of bring it with you, you're doing yourself a disservice. Right. But I had fun. It was a good time.
Yeah, yeah. So you say, when you say sort of when you don't bring it with you, is that kind of just to check my understanding? Are you saying it's important to bring the past with you or to let it go?
I'm saying it's important to never. So when you do something, I think that remains a part of you and that shapes you and molds you into the person you are. So for you to discard that, sort of like just because like a trend is over, or just because you think that you're onto newer things, is kind of a disservice. And like there should always be an element of your past in your future. That's how you leave a legacy and tell the story that you want to tell. Or else sometimes it might just seem like wagon jumping, which is something I've never really been that enamored by.
Yeah, no, that makes sense, man. I do a lot of. I'm quite interested in what elements to take from your past into your future, because some people are like, I want to leave mistakes, I want to leave that musical project behind, but actually, you wouldn't be the person you are today without that. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, and it would also be crazy to do that, I think, because there's so much room to sort of tell your story through your past and like through your mistakes and through everything, like the joyous times. There's new angles and avenues and like platforms and mediums to continue that story. And I think like storytelling has always been a very big part of my output from early children to the stuff that I'm doing now. It's essentially just telling stories and figuring out the most optimal way to share those.
Yeah, absolutely. And talking about, sort of where you're at now, you've got a new track coming out in August under the letter CMWIF.
Yeah, Catch Me When I Fall stands for.
Yeah, Catch Me When I Fall. Right, nice one. And I wanted to ask you, like, you've got some demos on YouTube. Obviously, The Devil I Know was the first thing that kind of brought people back to you. A lot of success on streaming. You've also got you're bringing the NFT into some of the NFTs into some of your work now. So how does Catch Me When I Fall as a new, kind of a new track that's coming up represent does it represent a move away or a kind of a similar sort of state of mind to what you were in when you wrote Devil I Know and you you sort of came back as Okandi, and sort of how have you kind of progressed and developed, I guess, within the new material based on, sort of in comparison rather to where you were when you came back with Devil I Know?
With Catch Me When I Fall, that's sort of the same thing as every release. Like you say, it's just been like a slew of demos just thrown out there, because everything that I write and I've been releasing, it's almost all done on the spot. So it's like a reaction to exactly what is going on at any given moment. And so with Catch Me When I Fall, it's very much like I was just capturing what I was feeling. I think I wrote that in the middle of the pandemic, and it's not necessarily autobiographical. I had a load of people just sort of sending me messages, just wondering how to cope, feeling super lost, super vulnerable, as you would. I mean, we're in the middle of a pandemic and people are being told that they're not allowed to see their loved ones. Like I had people hitting me up who had people that they were really scared that they would not be on this earth anymore, and they didn't know what to do. And it all just sort of came out. I remember I wrote it with my daughter next to me, and I was just sort of like writing this song and thinking, okay, this is gonna have to come out at some point, but I have no idea how I'm gonna do it independently, because I'm trying to essentially get that song to a place that it can touch a bunch of people. I think there's a lot of power in music, especially like music that tries to speak collectively and sort of maybe explain how people might be feeling and why things don't seem as rosy as they should. when it's meant to be Freedom Day, especially when you lose the Euros. That song's taking out brand new meaning off the back of that Euros debacle.
Absolutely, man. Absolutely. Yeah. That's a whole other thing. But I was mortified. Like, do you know what I mean? Like you talk about, your pride of going into the game and thinking possibly, this could be work, and then the response afterwards, just across the board, just it made me feel really ashamed to be from the UK. I think in terms of the attitude, like I sometimes, because I remember before I lived in the US, I put it on a pedestal, and I was like, oh, things are much better over there, and I lived over there, and it was cool, but it wasn't quite the experience I thought it was going to be. But I came back here with all this kind of hope, and there was a lot of wonderful things about living here, but then something like that, and it just kind of brings out the people's underbelly, the stuff
the
they hide away.
Underbelly of weird hate on this tiny island. It's strange. Like I said, I moved to Kent, to a very small town, and they've got issues on their own. I mean, there's like UKIP happy over here. And I've seen like Confederate flags like in Kent, and I'm like, what happened here that's got stuff so almost backwards in a sense? And then when the pandemic happened, I started to see why. Essentially, you've got a bunch of hurt people who want to hurt people, and a lot of misinformation, which seems almost targeted to make that a much bigger and sort of like, I guess, juicier hotbed of division. And I guess the song sort of tries to reflect the feelings of someone who's just in the middle of that, looking around like, what on earth is going on? Because sometimes you just don't have answers for things anymore.
No. I mean, that's interesting, because you mentioned, obviously, you reached out. A lot of people reached out to you, and gave you their experiences. But there was a particular quote in the press release, the stuff that you sent over to me, where you said, you were exhausted and vulnerable, and I wonder, reflecting on your previous answer, is that because of what you saw around you? Can you go into a bit more detail, however comfortable you may be, to talk about
absolutely, it's fine. Well, basically, I mean, the same way, I'm human. I'm just like anyone else. I might be 6'8" and like have some kind of, I don't know, maybe I've got a little bit of esteem in certain industries or whatever, but I'm human just like anyone else. And the stuff that I do by myself, and it can be exhausting. Also, the way that I handle things, I don't handle things like most people do. Like, my thing is, I'm very much an oversharer. I think oversharing, I think really expressing yourself and your true self, it stops you from necessarily needing to reach out all the time. I think the whole point of my being even is almost using everything that I can as a free form of therapy in order to just sort of get stuff out there, regardless of consequence, regardless of opinion. And I think that is the way that you can really be the freest. I mean, going back to your thoughts on sort of like self-image and the projection of that self-image within social media. I mean, social media can be a fake place. It can be a very, very fake place. Yeah. And if you let it, the stuff that you see can really sort of bring you down, unless you are part of that conversation and you are really just putting your stamp and your own personality out there. It can get consumed, and you just become, well, you either shut up or you act like everyone else. I mean, TikTok is the perfect example of that. Like, you have to do the dance like everyone else, or like you can't fit in. And so my response is usually to really fight against that with my words. And sometimes that can be an alienating feeling. I mean, I'll talk about racism, I'll talk about like injustices in the world, I'll talk about the music industry, which, I mean, now that I'm doing this whole tech thing, that's opened up a whole can of worms, which I hope to sink into pretty soon. But after a lot of that, it can be a bit like demoralizing. You'll get vulnerable, you'll get exhausted. I think a lot of people feel that. And I also feel like a lot of people are too proud to admit that. So I like to be the catalyst who's just like, listen, this guy who I guess most people for some reason think he's got everything together, I'm kind of just like you. And if you want to talk, you want to listen, I'm here.
Absolutely, man. That's really cool. It's a nice, nice message to send, because I think people, again, what people hope. I hope I hope it doesn't sound sort of confrontational, but I think the way people sort of social media presents you in a certain way, and I think the brand and the visuals, and it's really cool. Like, it's nice to see, obviously there's so many lovely photos of you and your family, and it's really nice, and it's nice to know that people can reach out to you, and get thoughts, get feelings from you and stuff, and share experiences. Because I think, again, the problem when social media presents things in a certain way, people think, I can't message that person. I'm not cool enough to message that person, which is, again, a conversation I've had with some young people. They're like, I want to, speak to this person for advice, but I'm not, I don't think they're going to get back to me. But what I'm hearing is that, within reason, of course, you're a busy person, if somebody gets in touch with you, somebody wants to reach out to you, if you can, you'll be able to speak to them, be able to.
I'm literally just an ear. I'm just an ear. Like, I like to take things in, and if I can help, I can. But I mean, I see people now who a year ago were really going through it, and they're sort of posting about like their sober journey and how like they found themselves. And I have no idea if I had anything to do with that, but I'm just glad to see that they're doing well. That's like my main thing. I just kind of want everyone to be okay. Like, no one's gonna be perfect, but as long as you're okay, we're good.
Absolutely, man. Absolutely. That's, again, a lovely message. Couple more questions there. I think it'd be a shame not to talk about something that's, you've been talking about NFTs for a while. You've obviously spoken to the BBC about it as well. It's a part of what you're trying to do now. Now, I went on eToro the other day, and I was like, what the fuck is this? Like, it scared the living shit out of me, right? Like, I'd like to do some investing at some point, right? I'd like to, but I was just like, this completely blew my mind, right? And I spoke to Maxim from The Prodigy the other day, because he's doing a lot of NFT art, right? And he, again, so enthusiastic about blending the tech world and music.
But I read that article. I need to have a conversation with him, actually.
Well, first question for you is what sparks your interest in it? Because, again, you're a musician, you're a creative, and it's something that's coming up in the music industry, in the world in general, in investments. So what sparked your interest? Tell me about that.
Well, I mean, this was like maybe a year before the pandemic, maybe 2 years ago, maybe up to 3 years ago now. I sort of just started reading about NFTs, and I started essentially seeing how independent digital artists and like creative artists and stuff were essentially using their skill set to make something that people suddenly found had a new tangible value.
Yeah.
And to me, that was just like a very interesting thing. And I was like, this could be something that could work for a collective group of artists who feel like they don't have the visibility in a world where everything's very homogenized, everything has its place, and there's so many like standard avenues to get yourself seen by paying for it. I was like, this is a very interesting technology. I didn't think it was going to be as big as this, but then the pandemic happened, and it essentially flipped that into what people are calling a new art form. And my thing is, NFTs, as they are now, are kind of naff, as in, it's a bit of a piss take, right?
Yeah, right.
Because if you're selling tweets for X amount of money, sure, meme equity is important, but what the power that I think they really hold is essentially the way that they are. God, sometimes I even find it hard to explain, especially when my job is coming up. But what they are is they open up a new avenue for artists to present their works and present them in a new, unique, interesting, and ultimately independent route that takes away a lot of the meddling, if you will, of your gatekeeper, of your industry professional, of your A&R. And like, I think personally, that's a reason that you don't really see traditional music industry adopting them as much as you would. I think they are there for the independent. And I've been independent my entire life. Like from very children, I've done a bit of work with like major label artists and major label executive, people like that. But my main thing has always been like direct to consumer, power to the people, power to me, power to you. Everyone wants power, right? Yeah. And I think NFTs, if utilized correctly, should basically just give that power to people nearly for free. And so I'm working with the help of a team that I've been building for the last year, let's say realistically from January, trying to basically build what I believe could maybe be, you can quote me on this actually, I'll say it. It could be the future of the music industry, but as an independent artist, it has to start at home. Yeah. I'm treating it like a football club, really and truly, just hopefully without the problematic natures and all that. I think it could be very interesting.
Yeah, it's an exciting time because I think streaming and stuff is great and all that, but again, the artist is earning sort of a tiny fraction, and I know that you can get a lot from radio plays, for example. You can get some money from that, but again, radio has a different sway now than it did 10 years ago, 20 years ago.
I mean, we're in a digital age, and also there's a lot to do with transparency as well. Like there's a lot of sort of cloak and dagger, backhanded routes you have to take in order to see these results, in order to figure out your streaming, in order to, in order to play the game, basically. Yes. And so it's like, okay, NFTs have been introduced and they're telling me that there's a new game that can be played. And right now you've got the same people who control everything else who are now sort of muscling in to this new territory and trying to gain some kind of leverage and control it. And I'm just here sort of quietly in the background, just figuring out, watching what people are doing, figuring it out, and just trying to spread it around. Because I really do think that NFTs, once again, I can't say too much because there's a lot of IP issues and a lot of stuff to do with copyright and stuff. But long story short, NFTs, if utilized correctly, could just turn people from market, like basically it opens the market for a lot of independent artists to sort of come through in ways that I can't really go into just yet, but it's very, very exciting.
Yeah, I'm excited for you, man. I'm excited for you for sure. Okay, well, a couple of the sort of plug-in questions now. Obviously, there's a couple of things you got to keep close to the chest. But what can you tell me that you've got coming up? What? Obviously, we've got the single coming out, which hopefully we're going to be hosting for you. But what else have you got to share with your? I'm never comfortable using the word fans too much, but with your community, what have you got to share that you've got coming up that you can tell us about?
Well, we're going to build a community first. So what we're planning is essentially Catch Me When I Fall is going to be the canvas for a host of content and reworks and just musical exploration, put it that way. So we're going to be exploring video, exploring audio, exploring art, and using that to essentially, like I said earlier, turn Catch Me When I Fall into something that really stands the test of time and is done in a way that hopefully no one else has really explored before. And if we can get that right, which I think we can, if we can get that right, then more like that. Essentially, it's Catch Me When I Fall, and look out for collaborations, a lot of collaborations, and just partnerships. We're making partnerships out.
Absolutely, yeah. Collaboration is key.
It is.
Certainly a lesson I learned for sure. Okay, man. Well, yeah. Final question of the interview then. In terms of your, again, I nearly did it then. In terms of your community that you've built since O Children, the people that follow you on social media, the people that do support you, what message have you got? Straight from you to them. people that have got behind you since the beginning of your career, through the difficult times, through the great times, until this point. What is your message for the people that have followed you and supported you all this time?
My message for them is thank you, literally. I say it all the time. Like, I love my fans. I miss my friends. I'm happy to call them fans because that's what they call themselves. They message me all the time. And without those people, there is no chance that I'd be here releasing or making any kind of music or anything. I was completely out of it, out of music, out of everything for maybe like 3-4 years, having had a breakdown, then having to sort of pick myself up. And there's no way that I would have been able to return from that if not for, like I said, people just sort of constantly knocking on your door. And the thing that I would say back to them is keep on knocking, like not just at me, but like at anything that you want to achieve. Because if you have the power, collective power, to get someone like me just sort of out of retirement, if you will, you can do a lot with that power as well for yourselves, especially in hard times.
Absolutely, man. Just to add to that, you mentioned you did have a difficult time between children and coming back, and that's a question. Again, one of the questions I get asked a lot is like, a lot of people I work with suffer with depression, they suffer with anxiety, really difficult things that they have to get through, and just to get out of bed in the morning is a challenge. And I wanted to ask you, what is it when you're having a rough time? What is it, are there any things that you do, any things you use, anything that you sort of think about that gets you out of bed on those difficult times, that gets you motivated?
Oh, that's a good one. That's a very good one. Things that get me motivated. I mean, for me personally, my family, my child, just sort of like one glance at my daughter, for example, and it's sort of like, I've got that push, I've got that drive again. Generally, I find breathing helps. It's something that I forget to do a lot, but if you actually because when you get like anxious and stuff, you forget to breathe. Like you sort of just like get all pent up. And something as simple as a few deep breaths a day, cliche as it sounds, it really does help you just sort of like, okay, you can get through it. List of goals. There's lots of things.
Yeah. Okay, man. All right. And outside of music, again, just to finish off, outside of music, you mentioned your family, you mentioned, those inspirations, but what music do you listen to? What art do you look at? What movies do you watch? What games do you play? Things that inspire you outside of a musical. Well, I suppose I did ask you what music you're listening to, but outside of your own music, outside of your own sphere, what kind of stuff's inspiring you at the moment?
At the moment, I'm listening to a lot of Ghost Poet.
Nice,
that was like a new sort of introduction to my life, which I was like, wow, this is great, really good. A lot of sort of Baxter Drury, Black MIDI.
Black MIDI,
yeah, really cool. And then essentially, I just listened to a lot of, God, I wish I could remember some right now. Wife Patrol, that's a good one. But a lot of people that just sort of like find me, and they're all artists, they're all musicians, writers, and stuff. And my Instagram at this point is just like a treasure trove of just really interesting, unknown artists. That's like, I don't know, like I say, collaboration is key. So I'm listening to a lot of them as well.
Yeah, good message, man. Good message. Cool. Well, thank you so much for your time today, Tobias. I'll end the interview portion. Thank you so much for taking the time out for me and spending time with me. It's been an absolute pleasure.
No, thank you.